Aaron Cole had been counting down the miles since he left the base. Each stretch of empty highway felt like a line crossed off a sentence he had been serving. Deployment was supposed to end next week, but when the commanding officer announced early leave for a handful of men, Aaron signed his name before the words were finished. He had been away almost 3 months, 3 months of sand-colored training fields on the West Coast, 3 months without letters or photos from home, 3 months since he had last touched his daughter's hair or heard the unfiltered sound of her laugh. Now it was nearly midnight. Rain sheeted down on Maple Avenue, turning the quiet suburb into a watercolor blur. His truck tires hissed against the asphalt as he slowed in front of the small house he had bought 2 years earlier, a house he imagined every night from his bunk, yellow siding, narrow driveway, a porch light that always seemed too dim in the rain. The Ring doorbell chimed as he approached, the sound tinny in the storm. His rucksack clung to his back like another body, heavy with gear still damp from the coast. He reached under the familiar turtle-shaped stone by the porch light where the spare key had been hidden since before he met Laurel. But the deadbolt turned too easily. The door was already unlocked. That small detail pierced him sharper than the rain. When the door opened, the smell hit him, lavender and lemon. Strong, synthetic, the kind sold in bottles that promised freshness but instead smelled like a lie. He paused in the doorway, boots dripping onto the mat, eyes adjusting to the dim glow inside. The living room didn't look like the living room he remembered. The couch, his couch, was gone. In its place sat a sleek gray sectional with spotless cushions arranged as if for a magazine photo shoot. A candle flickered on the dining table, flame burning tall and steady. Everything was too clean, too deliberate. And most alarming of all, there were no traces of Mia. No stuffed animal tossed over the armrest, no small shoes kicked aside, no coloring book splayed open on the coffee table. It was as if a child had never lived here. Aaron? Laurel's voice came from the kitchen, smooth but uncertain. She stepped into the hallway wiping her hands on a white apron he had never seen before. She looked younger than he remembered, hair tied up neatly, skin glowing under the soft light. She smiled, but it was a thin smile, the kind used to test waters. "I didn't think you'd be home tonight." "Got early leave," he said, placing the rucksack down slowly. His voice sounded flat in his own ears. "Thought I'd surprise you." Her smile faltered but returned quickly. "Mia will be thrilled." Aaron's eyes scanned the room again, searching for some trace of his daughter. The silence felt wrong. Houses with children had a pulse, a rhythm of toys, mess, small disasters. This place was sterile. Before he could ask, the sound came. A scream. It ripped down from the second floor, shrill and raw, not the playful squeal of a child pretending but the panicked cry of a child who had forgotten how to hold back. "Daddy!" Aaron moved before he had time to think. 3 strides, and he was at the foot of the stairs. His boots hammered each step except the third, which he skipped from instinct. He had fixed its squeak months before but still remembered it. At the top, Mia's door was closed, the first time he had ever seen it locked. He tried the handle. Jammed. He stepped back half a pace, braced himself, and slammed his boot against the knob. The wood splintered with a crack and the door flew open, hitting the wall so hard it left a fresh dent. The hallway light spilled across the bedroom. Mia was huddled in the corner near the closet, knees pulled to her chest, hair stuck damply against her tear-streaked face. On her cheek bloomed the faint outline of a hand, still red, like someone had pressed her face against fire and let go too late. Between father and daughter stood Laurel. Her hands gripped a small pillow as if she had just dropped it or perhaps used it moments earlier. She blinked, startled, then quickly composed herself. "She slipped," she said too fast. "I told her not to run and her voice cracked. You're dripping water everywhere, Aaron." Aaron dropped to his knees beside Mia. "Bug." His voice softened until it barely carried. He reached out slowly, his hand trembling, but Mia flinched away just enough to show him that trust was no longer something she could give easily. He pulled off his wet field jacket and wrapped it around her, swallowing her small frame. She didn't push it off, but she didn't lean into him either. Her arms stayed limp, as if she had forgotten how to return warmth. He turned to Laurel. His jaw tightened. "You told me she was asleep." "At the time," Laurel said quickly, shifting the pillow from one hand to the other. "She was." From the hallway came another presence. Tyler, Laurel's 19-year-old brother, leaned against the doorframe in a gray hoodie, earbuds dangling, phone in hand. His eyes were heavy with sleep or maybe boredom. "Everything okay up here?" he asked with a smirk that didn't match the scream Aaron had just heard. Aaron didn't answer. He lifted Mia carefully and stood. Her small arms hung down, her face pressed into his collarbone, too weak even to cling. As he carried her downstairs, he felt her body trembling against his chest. The living room looked staged, unreal. He set her gently on the sectional, pulled a throw blanket over her, and brushed damp hair from her forehead. Her eyes stared straight ahead, unfocused. He turned, faced Laurel, Tyler, and Margaret, who had appeared silently at the top of the stairs, her face unreadable. "What's going on here?" Aaron's voice was low, the command tone of a soldier, not a husband. The silence that followed was louder than the scream. Aaron didn't sleep. He sat in the living room until the first gray sliver of dawn slipped between the blinds, one hand resting lightly on Mia's small shoulder, feeling the uneven rhythm of her breathing under the blanket. Each time she stirred in half-sleep, she flinched as if expecting another blow. His field jacket still wrapped her like armor, the heavy canvas absurdly large for her thin frame. He whispered to her once, just her nickname, but her lashes only fluttered before sinking again. When the rain softened to mist, he carried her upstairs. The broken door on its hinges scraped slightly against the floor as he pushed it open. He laid her on the bed, dimmed the light to its lowest setting, and pulled the blanket up to her chin. He stayed a long moment, watching the shadows on her face, before doing what soldiers do best, checking. Quietly, carefully, he inspected her wrists, elbows, knees, the back of her neck. He knew how to find bruises hidden from casual eyes. The army had taught him how to identify injuries in places most wouldn't think to look. On her wrist, a bruise the color of fading storm clouds, yellow and purple tangled together. At her nape, a small round mark, almost circular, like the pressure of a thumb. He inhaled sharply and forced himself to release it slow, steady, soundless. Downstairs, the house was already awake. The smell of coffee drifted through the hall, sharp and bitter. In the kitchen, Laurel stood at the counter, knife slicing apples into perfect crescents, each motion brisk and practiced. She looked like someone performing domestic normalcy for an audience. Margaret sat at the island in her rose-colored sweater set, pearls at her throat, a mug cupped delicately in her hands as if she were judging a tea ceremony. Tyler lounged at the table, hood pulled over his head, scrolling on his phone with one hand while shoveling cereal with the other. Aaron stepped into the doorway. He didn't clear his throat. He just stood until they noticed. Tyler looked up first. "Is Mia still asleep?" His tone was casual, too casual. "She's tired," Aaron said. His eyes stayed on Laurel's hands as the knife tapped against the board. "What's the bruise on her cheek?" The knife paused. Laurel's eyes flicked up for half a second before returning to the apple. "She's clumsy," she said. The answer came too easily, as if she'd practiced. "And the mark on her wrist?" His voice dropped, steadier, heavier. "Old," Laurel said. Her shoulders stiffened but she didn't stop slicing. "Maybe from school." Margaret sipped her coffee, her gaze cool. "Children bruise all the time," she said, voice clipped, matter of fact. "Besides, the sitter never was reliable. Standards matter in a home, Aaron. You'll find that out soon enough." There was no sitter. Not anymore. The neighbor's daughter had quit months ago. Aaron said nothing. He let silence stretch until the air itself seemed taut. Then he turned and walked away. He drove Mia to preschool that morning, saying little. She sat strapped in the booster seat, teddy bear clutched in both hands, staring out the window as raindrops raced each other down the glass. She didn't hum or ask questions the way she used to. She was too still, the kind of still that worried him more than tears. At the red brick building at the end of the street, Ms. Green stood at the doorway with her clipboard. Her eyes softened when she saw Mia but stiffened when she saw Aaron in uniform. She crouched. "Good morning, Mia." Mia nodded without speaking, clutching the bear tighter. When the door closed behind her, Aaron kept his voice low. "While I was gone, did you notice anything?" Ms. Green adjusted her glasses, buying time. "She's been quieter. Draws alone. Doesn't share. Startles at loud noises. Less smiling. Bruises?" The pause told him before she spoke. "Once. Wrist. Another time, near the hairline." Ms. Laurel said, "She's clumsy." "You believe that?" She met his eyes for 2 beats. That was enough. He slid her a card with a number handwritten twice, once for emphasis. "Call if anything happens." Anything. That afternoon he returned home early. Claimed a headache. Went upstairs. Lay on the bed with the door cracked just enough for air. He closed his eyes, but every nerve stayed awake, listening. Houses talk. They creak, sigh, shift, and sometimes whisper. From below came the clink of silverware, the scrape of a suitcase wheel over hardwood. Then, the soft shuffle of small slippers in the hallway, stopping near the kitchen. Laurel's voice floated up, calm, practiced, then edged. "Tracking dirt again? How far are you going to push me?" Silence stretched like a pulled string. "You should be grateful," Laurel's voice sharpened. "Food. Warmth. A house. Your mother didn't even," the rest broke off. Then Tyler's voice, lazy, cruel, "The monster under the bed is hungry. It likes knees. Doesn't like tattletales." Something fell, a broom handle. A brush, hitting the tile with a clatter. Aaron was already moving. He descended the stairs without a sound, hand gripping the railing so hard his knuckles whitened. At Mia's door, he heard the scrape of cloth, the faint whimper of a child trying not to make noise. He pushed the door open. Mia was on the floor, rag in hand, scrubbing at a puddle that wasn't there anymore. Her small fingers were red, skin rubbed raw. Her pajamas clung damply to her knees. Tyler straightened, words tumbling out. "She spilled water. I was joking, just teasing." Laurel appeared behind him, face arranged into concern. "I didn't know he came up here. You know how sensitive she is, Aaron. She overreacts." Aaron knelt. Took the rag from Mia's hands as gently as if it were glass. Her eyes didn't meet his. Her body was still, too still. "You okay, sweetheart?" His voice cracked. She nodded once. Mechanical. Practiced. Aaron rose, fists clenched. "Out." Laurel hesitated, calculating. Tyler scowled, muttered, but both obeyed. Aaron closed the door behind them. He sat on the floor across from Mia, not too close, leaving space. The room felt smaller than he remembered, stripped of drawings, the walls bare. At the foot of the bed, her teddy bear lay crooked. He picked it up. Its belly seam had been opened and clumsily sewn shut with thick, uneven stitches. He slipped a finger inside and pulled out folded scraps of paper. A crayon drawing of a house with 3 figures, one tall, one small, one faceless. A pencil note in shaky letters, "Don't tell." Aaron folded the papers carefully and slipped them into his pocket. He looked back at his daughter. "If there's anywhere you want to go," he said softly, "anywhere at all, you tell me." Mia didn't answer. But she shifted, barely, inching closer to him. It was small, almost invisible. But to Aaron, it felt like the first crack of sunlight through a storm. The house was too quiet that evening. Rain had thinned to a drizzle, streaking the windows, turning the glow from the street lamps into wavering smudges. Aaron sat at the kitchen table, the remains of a reheated dinner still on his plate, when his laptop chimed. It wasn't an email he expected. This inbox was one he rarely checked, used mostly for warranty notices and coupon spam. But the subject line was blank, the sender untraceable. When he opened it, there were only 8 words. For the real father, ask her about the closet corner. No signature. No explanation. The simplicity made it feel heavier than any long accusation could have. Aaron read it 3 times, his jaw tightening. His mind jumped back to the rag in Mia's small hands, the red rawness of her skin, the crooked stitches in the teddy bear hiding those notes, the crayon drawing with the faceless woman, and the shaky letters, "Don't tell." He closed the laptop softly, stood, and went upstairs. The towel he'd stuffed against Mia's broken door muffled the hallway light. He knocked once, softly, then pushed the door open. She was curled beneath the blanket, the teddy bear pressed to her chest like a shield. Her eyes opened when she sensed him, wide and wary, though she didn't speak. Aaron lowered himself to the rug, cross-legged, careful not to loom over her. "Some corners feel safer than others," he said quietly. "When I was away, sometimes I'd find one spot to sit, just to breathe until it felt like I could stand up again." Her gaze flicked, just for a heartbeat, toward the closet, then back to his hands. She didn't say a word. But her grip on the bear's ear tightened until the stitches stretched. That was answer enough. "Okay," he whispered. "I understand." That night, Aaron staged his absence. At 11:50 p.m., he rattled his keys, opened and closed the front door loud enough for anyone listening, and let the truck's engine rumble before fading into the night. He parked 3 houses down, killed the lights, and waited in the cab until midnight. Then he slipped out, keeping to shadows, and circled back along the fence line. The storage window had a flaw he knew well. A knife blade, a careful twist, and it gave. He slid inside silently, landing on familiar hardwood without a sound. The house smelled of lemon cleaner, but beneath it clung the faint scent of damp laundry, a detail out of place, like a mask slipping. Upstairs, he skipped the 3rd step out of instinct. He put a hand to Mia's door, feeling for movement in the air. None. He nudged it open just enough to see the room. Mia wasn't in bed. She was curled in the corner near the closet, knees to her chest, teddy bear squashed in her arms. Her breathing came shallow, broken, as if even in sleep she was bracing for something. Aaron lowered himself slowly, sitting beside her against the wall. "Bug," he murmured. She stirred, blinked once, and then tipped her head against his shoulder. She didn't cry. Crying was a luxury she no longer trusted, but her small frame trembled in waves, each one stealing a little more of his breath. He sat still, steadying his breathing until she unconsciously matched him, 4 counts in, 4 out. After a long while her body eased, her grip loosening slightly. He tucked the bear under her arm, lifted her gently, and returned her to the bed, pulling the blanket snug around her. Before leaving, he pulled out his phone and started a recording, not for words but for the silence itself. Because silence, in this house, wasn't peace. It was proof. Outside in the cold, Aaron called Marcus Finch. His voice shook despite himself. "I've got reason to believe it's real. Anonymous tip. Closet corner. I just found her sleeping there." Marcus's tone was low, calm, like it always had been on missions. "You want to smash a wall," he said. "But that won't help her. We need a case, not a scene." "I know." Aaron rubbed his temple. "What do I do?" "Meet me tomorrow. I'll bring what you need. You stay boring. You stay steady." The next day, Marcus laid the tools out in a shuttered phone shop, a smart plug disguised as a repair part, a pen camera, and a magnet recorder. You don't put anything on her, Marcus said firmly. She doesn't carry our fear. These are for you, not for her. Aaron nodded. He understood. That evening, he told Laurel he was fixing the flickering outlet in Mia's room. He explained each step like a YouTube handyman: breaker off, wires checked, receptacle swapped. He plugged in the smart cube, showed her the app graph, smiled as if nothing was strange. He clipped the pen camera to his shirt pocket and joined dinner. He forced himself to laugh at Tyler's stories. He said thank you for the garlic bread. He asked Margaret about her fundraiser. Everything rehearsed, everything dull. Because dull was safety now. But at 2:07 a.m., his phone buzzed. The first file had finished uploading. He pressed play through earbuds, his heart hammering. Footsteps. Laurel's voice, sharp and low, spilled again. How many times? Useless, just like your. Then the smack of something hard, not wood, not cloth, skin against flat. Mia's breath broke apart into gasps. Tyler's whisper slithered close, monster-like sneeze. Secret. Don't forget. The door clicked shut. Silence stretched. Aaron sat in the dark, fists trembling, nails digging into his palms. Every part of him wanted to storm down the hall, but he stayed seated. He called Marcus again, voice raw. It's enough to start, Marcus said. Not enough to convict. Keep recording. Keep smiling. We'll build the chain. Aaron pressed his eyes shut. Tomorrow he would smile at breakfast. He would thank someone for the salt. And he would keep building the file that no judge could dismiss. Because this wasn't about rage anymore. This was about survival, for Mia. Aaron woke the next morning to the thin light of dawn seeping through the blinds. His eyes felt heavy, but his body was alert in that way soldiers know, ready even when exhausted. The recording from 2:07 a.m. still echoed in his head, Laurel's hissed insult, the sound of a slap, Tyler's whisper about the monster. It played like a loop, and every loop made his chest tighter. But when he came downstairs, he wore the mask. Coffee brewed, the smell filling the kitchen. Laurel moved about in a robe, humming too brightly. Tyler shuffled in yawning, hoodie half-zipped, scrolling his phone. Margaret was already seated, pearls in place, sipping coffee as if nothing in the world could touch her composure. Morning, Aaron said evenly, sliding into a chair. He poured himself coffee and stirred sugar in slowly, hiding the tremor in his hand. He asked Tyler about his class schedule, listened to Margaret complain about the HOA trash can rules, and even complimented Laurel's casserole from the night before. Every word felt like swallowing gravel, but it was part of the act. Mia came down last, teddy bear in tow. Her eyes darted toward him, then away, but when he reached out to adjust her sweater collar, she didn't recoil. That was enough for now. On the drive to school, Mia traced her finger on the fogged glass. I'll be here at 3, Aaron said softly at the curb. She didn't nod, but she didn't shrink either. Small victories mattered. Back home, Aaron set to work. He connected the smart plug's data to his phone, downloaded the audio, and saved it on 2 encrypted drives, one for him, one for Marcus. He filled out a chain of custody log in block letters: date, time, device, file name, location. It looked almost absurdly official, but in court, details like that mattered. At noon he met Marcus at a rundown diner off the highway. Marcus slid into the booth with a duffel at his side. Aaron handed him the drive and the printed log. Marcus didn't even peek. He just tucked them away like a man who trusted the weight of evidence more than words. It's clean, Marcus said after Aaron described the setup. You swapped the outlet in plain sight, didn't hide it in a toy. That'll hold. Now we braid this with other strands, teacher's notes, doctor's testimony, maybe a neighbor. We don't want one rope. We want a net. Aaron leaned back, coffee cooling in front of him. How long before the net's strong enough? As long as it takes, Marcus said. And as short as it needs to be. The point is, you don't blow it now. You stay boring. You let them think you're settling back in. Boring, Aaron repeated. He almost laughed. He'd trained for raids and reconnaissance, but here, the hardest tactic was sitting still, smiling at people who made his blood burn. That evening, he played his part again. He laughed at Tyler's rambling story about a professor, nodded along to Margaret's lecture about community standards, and thanked Laurel when she refilled his glass. Meanwhile, the pen camera rested on the dining table by Mia's word tiles, capturing sighs, sharp tones, and long silences. After dinner, he helped Mia build words: home, safe, door. She pressed the tiles carefully, her lips barely moving as she sounded them out. When she spelled door, her eyes flicked toward the hallway. Aaron caught the look but said nothing. Later, at 8:30, he stood outside the bathroom as she brushed her teeth. Top, bottom, wiggle, he reminded, and she obeyed like it was a drill. He read her 2 pages of a library book, the most she could stand, and tucked her in. I'll be right down the hall, he said. This time she looked at him for a second longer before rolling over. At 2 a.m., the phone buzzed with the second recording. Aaron slid in earbuds, every muscle tight. Footsteps. The soft squeak of the door. Laurel's voice, low and cold, "You're making me do this." Then Mia's tiny gasp, the kind that splits a father in half. Silence stretched. Aaron ripped the earbuds out, pacing the room, fists trembling. The urge to storm down the hall nearly crushed him. But he forced himself to stop, staring out the window into the dark yard. Storming would win nothing. What Mia needed wasn't rage. It was proof. The next morning, he slipped a manila envelope across the booth to Marcus, the new file, screenshots of usage spikes, another signed log. Marcus nodded once. 3 nights, consistent. It's becoming a pattern. Judges believe patterns. Aaron rubbed his eyes. You sure we're not too late? We're right on time, Marcus said firmly. You stay steady. Saturday brought a small test. Mia left a glass of water on the coffee table, a ring spreading slowly into the wood. Laurel's eyes sharpened, lips parting to scold. Aaron intercepted, lifting the cup. My fault, he said lightly. Forgot the coaster. He winked at Mia like it was a game. Laurel shut her mouth, irritated but contained. Aaron carried that moment with him all day. Tiny interventions kept the air from snapping. But tiny interventions weren't enough. Evidence had to grow heavier, voices had to multiply. He knew the next step, others needed to speak, teachers, neighbors, doctors. The net Marcus talked about needed more strands. That night, as he left Mia's door cracked and the hallway light glowing warm, he whispered to himself, no scenes. Only sequences. No fury. Only facts. He would keep the mask on as long as it took. Because every boring breakfast, every fake smile, every logged recording was one more brick in the wall that might finally keep Mia safe. On Monday morning, Aaron tucked Mia's lunch into her backpack and zipped it slowly, careful not to tug at the worn fabric. She hugged her bear the way some children hug umbrellas on sunny days, not because they need it at that moment, but because storms come fast. On the drive to school, she traced a finger along the window fog without looking at him. At the curb, Ms. Green crouched low, clipboard pressed to her knees. Morning, Mia, she said, voice soft but steady. Mia gave a small nod, eyes down. Aaron waited until she had stepped inside before speaking. Can I talk to you a moment? Ms. Green glanced toward the door, then back at him. 5 minutes, she said. They moved to the side of the steps where parents rarely linger. Aaron kept his voice low. You left me a note. Her lips pressed thin, but she nodded. I can't keep quiet anymore. I've seen her drawings. Always dark corners, houses without doors. And she startles so easily. Last week, she dropped a crayon and covered her head like, she broke off, shaking her head. That's not normal. Erin exhaled slowly. Have you noticed, marks? Yes. She pulled her cardigan tighter. Wrist once. Neck another time. Laurel said she's clumsy. But it didn't look like clumsy. She ever talked to you? No words. Just looks. But sometimes that's louder. Erin slipped her a card with Marcus's number on the back. If you see anything else, anything at all, call. Doesn't matter what time. Ms. Green held the card as if it were a match she wasn't sure she wanted to light. Do you think she's safe right now? I think she's safer because we're talking, Erin said. That afternoon, he walked the long way home, circling to the back fence of Mrs. Hamill's property. She was in her yard tending roses, pruning with the meticulousness of someone who needed order to quiet her nerves. When she saw him, she hesitated, secateur held midair. Morning, James, she said out of habit, then corrected herself. Erin. You're back. I need to ask about nights, he said plainly. Did you hear anything while I was gone? Her hands trembled just slightly. She set the clippers down on the wall. Soft crying. More than once. Sometimes it sounded like she was calling for someone. Did you ever hear Laurel? Yes. Not all the time. But sharp. Too sharp. Then silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong. She looked down at her shoes. I should have said something. I told myself maybe it was bad dreams. Or that I was too old to interfere. You're not too old, Erin said. And bad dreams don't leave bruises. Her eyes flicked up to his, watery but steady. If you need someone to speak, I can try. I can't swear to details, but I won't stay quiet anymore. Thank you, he said, and meant it. The next stop was Dr. Fields. The pediatric clinic sat between a laundromat and a nail salon, cheerful posters in the windows that did little to hide the sterile smell inside. Fields adjusted his glasses when Erin walked in without an appointment, papers scattering across his desk. Erin, he said carefully. I thought you were still deployed. I was. Now I'm here. Tell me the truth. Fields rubbed his forehead. She came in a few times. Mild sore throats. Once with irritation on the skin. Nothing unusual in the file. Erin leaned forward, voice dropping. Nothing unusual, or nothing you dared to write down. Fields hesitated, then sighed. Diane, Laurel, was always in control. She spoke for Mia, listed symptoms before I asked. She presented as the perfect mother. Confident. Polished. He looked down at his hands. I had suspicions. But I've been burned before. Reported once in another case and nearly lost my license when it didn't hold. She knew that. Told me if I wrote anything unfounded, she'd sue for harassment. Do you regret it? Every day, Fields said softly. And if you need testimony now, I'll give it. Erin studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You'll hear from Marcus. That evening at dinner, Laurel set down a casserole, smiling too wide. Your favorite, she said brightly. Tyler scrolled on his phone between bites. Margaret folded her napkin neatly, her eyes scanning the table with the precision of a general at inspection. Erin waited until Mia had excused herself to color at the side table before he spoke. Dr. Fields says you're very confident. Informed. Knows everything before he asks. Laurel froze, spoon in hand. What's that supposed to mean? Margaret's voice slid in, smooth as ice. It means you're competent. Something this house sorely needed. Erin met her gaze. Competent doesn't explain bruises. Margaret set her napkin down gently. You've been gone a long time. Stress plays tricks. Children fall. They bruise. And if you keep seeing ghosts, people will start to wonder if maybe the soldier isn't as steady as he once was. Tyler smirked, muttering, yeah, PTSD or whatever. Aaron's jaw tightened, but he stayed steady. He smiled, slow and cold. Then it's a good thing I keep records. The table went quiet. Laurel's hand trembled just slightly. Margaret's eyes narrowed, assessing, recalibrating. Tyler shifted in his chair, suddenly interested in his phone again. Mia kept coloring, small hand moving carefully across the page. She drew a house with a door open just a crack. Aaron took note. Doors that stayed cracked meant someone inside still hoped to breathe. Aaron had known for weeks that the storm in the house didn't really start with Laurel. It wasn't only Tyler's sneer or Laurel's brittle smiles. There was a colder force behind it, one that sat perfectly upright at the dinner table every evening, pearls steady against her throat. Margaret. She had that kind of presence you couldn't ignore even if you wanted to. A woman who never raised her voice but managed to fill a room with judgment. She didn't scold, she cut. She didn't shout, she rearranged reality until you doubted what you'd just seen. If Laurel was the hand that slapped, Margaret was the voice that excused it. It was Thursday night when the mask finally cracked a little. Dinner was over, Tyler had slunk off with his phone, and Mia was bent over a coloring page at the side table. Laurel stacked plates, humming a tune that sounded rehearsed. Aaron gathered forks into his fist, ready to stand, when Margaret said, "Stay." Her tone wasn't loud, but it was the sort that made soldiers pause on instinct. Aaron sat back slowly. "Something you want to say?" Margaret folded her napkin, aligning each corner perfectly. "Yes. You've been, circling. Asking questions. Speaking with neighbors. Teachers. Even the doctor." She looked up, her eyes narrowing. "That makes people talk, Aaron. And not kindly." Aaron kept his face still. "People should talk when a child has bruises." Margaret leaned forward just slightly. "Children bruise. They fall. They run too fast. You were away, and Laurel carried everything. The house. The child. The grief you left behind. You should be thanking her, not interrogating her." He felt his pulse thrum, but he forced his voice flat. "Gratitude doesn't erase marks on Mia's skin." Margaret's smile was small and dangerous. "Be careful, Aaron. Soldiers come home broken. People know that. A man seeing shadows where there are none, that story writes itself." The words dug under his armor. She was telling him, without saying it, that if he pushed too hard she'd paint him as unstable, a veteran too damaged to raise his own child. And he knew in this town, with Margaret's connections, people might believe her. That night, after tucking Mia in and checking the plug's steady red light, Aaron sat alone in the dark living room. He scrolled through the notes he'd collected, teachers' observations, neighbors' whispers, the doctor's guilt. All thin threads. Stronger together, but not yet unbreakable. He needed more. He needed to understand how Laurel had become this way, and Margaret was the key. The next day he drove out of town to meet Clarissa, an old high school classmate of Laurel's that Marcus had tracked down. They met in a quiet library corner, surrounded by shelves that smelled of dust and paper. "I always thought someone would come asking," Clarissa said after he explained. Her voice trembled. Back in school, Diane, Laurel, was different. She was bright once. Then she got pregnant. 17. The father was a college freshman. He vanished. Margaret locked her in the house for weeks. When she finally went to the hospital, it wasn't her choice. Margaret signed the consent papers for an abortion. Diane didn't even get to speak. Aaron felt the words sink like stones. And after? She was never the same. Distant. Cold. No friends. No laughter. Margaret called it discipline. I called it cruelty. But nobody stood up to her. Clarissa blinked hard. I wish I had. I was a kid too. Aaron left with his chest burning. Pieces clicked into place. Laurel, once Diane, had been shaped by the same cruelty she now inflicted on Mia. Margaret had trained her daughter in silence, in shame, in control. And now she was rewriting the same script for a 5-year-old who deserved none of it. That evening, Aaron confronted Margaret directly. The house was dim, rain whispering against the windows. Laurel was upstairs bathing Mia, Tyler's music thudded faintly through the ceiling. Aaron stood in the living room doorway, arms folded. You broke her, he said. Margaret didn't even look surprised. She set her teacup down carefully. Who? Laurel. Diane. Your daughter. You broke her when she was still a child, and now you're standing by while she breaks mine. Margaret's eyes glinted. I made her strong. No, Aaron said quietly. You made her hard. There's a difference. Silence stretched. Margaret finally leaned back, unshaken. Do what you think you must. Just remember, judges like order. They don't like chaos. And between the two of us, Aaron, who looks more orderly? Her confidence was absolute, as if she'd already gamed out every move he could make. But Aaron had one advantage Margaret hadn't accounted for: he wasn't playing for reputation, or comfort, or control. He was playing for his daughter's life. He stepped closer, voice low but firm. You may own the stories in this town, Margaret. But I own the truth in that house. And the truth has a way of getting louder. For the first time, her smile flickered. Not much. But enough. That night, as Mia drifted to sleep with the bear pressed against her cheek, Aaron sat at her bedside longer than usual. He brushed a lock of hair from her forehead, whispering, I'm here. I'm not leaving. Outside, the storm rattled the windows. But inside, he felt the shift. The battle lines were clearer now. Margaret wasn't just a shadow in the corner of the story, she was the storm itself. And storms, no matter how fierce, eventually break. The week crawled by with the weight of waiting. Aaron kept up the act, polite smiles, careful jokes, dull conversations, but beneath it all he counted hours. Every file, every log, every whisper from a neighbor or note from a teacher was now part of a dossier Marcus had quietly stitched together. And then, on Tuesday evening, the call came. It's enough, Marcus said over the line. We're ready for an emergency check. Statute 42-6. Tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock sharp. Aaron's throat tightened. That soon? You want fast, Marcus reminded him. But you also want strong. Don't interfere. Let the process carry itself. I'll be there. The night before, the house was calm in that uncanny way storms can be before they break. Laurel made spaghetti, humming as if rehearsing happiness. Tyler sprawled on the couch with his game controller. Margaret sat at the table, leafing through the newspaper as if the world still revolved around her. Aaron forced a chuckle at a story Tyler told, complimented the sauce, and helped Mia with her word tiles. She spelled stay this time, eyes flicking up at him as though testing. He nodded once, letting her know he understood. Later, when he tucked her in, she whispered, Are you leaving again? Not this time, he said firmly. Tomorrow, things change. She didn't ask how. She just pulled the bear tighter and turned toward the wall. Morning came gray and damp. Aaron rose before the others, shaved, and made coffee, his stomach knotted but his hands steady. He was at the sink when the knock came, 3 sharp raps at exactly 8 o'clock. Laurel looked up from slicing apples. Who's that? Probably a neighbor, Aaron said evenly, though his pulse quickened. Tyler groaned, shuffling toward the door. He yanked it open, and froze. Two uniformed officers stood on the porch, flanking a woman in a navy vest with Child Protective Services stitched across the chest. Marcus stood a step behind them, civilian clothes, badge on a lanyard. "Good morning," Marcus said calmly. "We have an emergency child welfare check order. Statute 42-6. Everyone in the house is required to cooperate." Laurel's knife clattered onto the cutting board. "What? There must be a mistake." The CPS worker produced the order, voice firm but even. "We've received reports and supporting evidence of potential abuse involving a minor resident. We need to see the child immediately." Tyler backed away, hands raised. "I don't know anything. I'm just staying here." He tried to dart for the back door, but one of the officers caught his arm, twisting it behind his back with professional ease. The cuffs clicked shut. Laurel's voice shot up an octave. "You can't do this. She's my child." "Step aside, ma'am," the officer said. Margaret appeared at the base of the stairs, composed as ever. "This is outrageous," she said coolly. "We're a respected family. You'll regret." But she stopped when she saw Aaron, standing off to the side, arms folded. He didn't say a word. He just met her gaze, steady as stone. The CPS worker walked past them and crouched gently by the dining table, where Mia sat stiff in her chair, apple slice untouched on her plate. "Hi, sweetheart," the worker said softly. "My name's Ellen. I'm here to help. Would you like to come with me?" Mia's eyes darted to Aaron. For the first time in weeks, they didn't just glance past him, they locked onto his. Aaron gave a small nod. "It's okay. You're safe." Mia slid off the chair slowly, teddy bear clutched in both hands. She crossed the floor and pressed herself against his side, small fingers clutching his shirt. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just leaned into him, the weight of trust heavier than any word. Laurel lunged forward, voice breaking. "You can't take her. She's mine." The officer blocked her with a hand. "You need to remain calm, ma'am." Marcus's voice cut through the chaos, quiet but commanding. "It's over. The evidence speaks. Don't make it worse." Margaret's eyes flicked from Aaron to Mia, and for the first time, her mask cracked. A tremor ran along her jaw, small but real. She said nothing. The officers escorted Tyler out the door, still muttering protests. The CPS worker guided Mia gently, but she refused to let go of Aaron's shirt. So Aaron walked with them, one hand steady on her shoulder. Outside, the gray sky broke just slightly, a thin streak of light cutting through. Neighbors had gathered on porches, whispers curling like smoke. For once, Aaron didn't care. Let them see. Let them all see. Afterward, the house felt hollow. Laurel sat at the table, face blotched, hands trembling but eyes dry. "Are you doing this because you hate me?" she asked hoarsely. Aaron sat across from her, arms folded. He let the silence stretch before answering. "No. I did it for Mia. But I don't hate you." Laurel blinked, confused, almost as if she'd expected fury. "I didn't mean to. I just didn't know how. I didn't know how to be a mother." Aaron studied her for a long moment. "Maybe. But knowing how isn't the same as choosing. And you chose wrong." He stood then, heading for the door. Just before stepping out, he paused, his voice low. "I hope you find a way to save yourself. If there's still a chance." That night, Aaron sat in Marcus's car with Mia asleep against his shoulder. Her breath was even, her teddy bear clutched close. Marcus drove in silence, eyes flicking to the rearview. "You can rest now," he said quietly. Aaron didn't answer. His gaze stayed on his daughter's face, finally calm, finally safe, for now. The storm had broken. But he knew storms leave wreckage, and battles rarely end with one strike. This was only the beginning of the real fight. The car ride to the Child Advocacy Center was quiet. Mia sat in the back seat, teddy bear hugged so tightly it seemed strained. Aaron drove, Marcus in the passenger seat, both men wrapped in silence. The wipers beat a steady rhythm against the windshield, and every so often Aaron glanced at the rearview mirror. Mia's eyes never met his. She stared out the window, but her knuckles stayed white around the bear. When they arrived, the building didn't look official. No brick courthouse, no cold marble floors. Just a low structure painted pale blue with murals of trees and clouds. A wooden sign by the door read Safe Steps Child Advocacy Center. The place was designed to look ordinary, but Aaron could feel the weight of its purpose pressing through the walls. Inside, a receptionist with kind eyes led them down a hallway lined with posters of rainbows and animals. The air smelled faintly of crayons, a detail that struck Aaron harder than he expected. He remembered Mia at 3, scribbling rainbows on scrap paper at the kitchen table, her laughter ringing out. That sound felt a lifetime away. The room itself was simple, a soft rug with colorful patterns, a low table with crayons scattered across it, a few dolls and puzzles neatly arranged. A camera was mounted in the corner, discreet but deliberate. On the other side of a one-way mirror, Aaron stood with Marcus and a CPS supervisor. He pressed a hand against the glass, almost without thinking. Inside, Mia sat cross-legged on the rug. Across from her, a woman in her 30s, wearing jeans and a cardigan, settled in. She introduced herself as Clara, a forensic interviewer. No clipboard, no stern voice, just warmth. She picked up a crayon, drew a simple sun on a blank page, and said, "Want to draw with me?" For a while, Mia only watched. Then, slowly, she reached for a green crayon and began tracing lines. Aaron's throat tightened when he saw what appeared, a house, rough lines, but under the bed she drew a dark scribble. Clara didn't push. "That's an interesting picture. Can you tell me about it?" Mia's voice was barely audible, even through the speakers in the observation room. "That's my room." Clara nodded, her tone calm. "And what's under the bed?" Mia's hand paused. She pressed the crayon harder, the dark scribble thickening. "The monster." Clara leaned forward slightly. "A monster? What kind?" Mia's lower lip trembled. It talks like Ricky. It says if I tell, it'll bite my legs off." Aaron's chest clenched. He felt Marcus's steadying hand on his shoulder, a reminder not to burst into the room. Clara continued gently. "That sounds really scary. When the monster talks, where are you?" "In the closet," Mia whispered. "It's the only place it can't see me." Clara placed her crayon down. "You're very brave for telling me." "Thank you." Mia didn't answer. She drew another figure, smaller, with a red mark on its cheek. Then she drew a bigger figure next to it, faceless. Clara's voice stayed even. "Who's that?" Mia stared at the paper. "That's Mommy." Aaron's hand tightened into a fist against the glass. He forced himself still. Clara didn't use Laurel's name, didn't guide the answer. She only asked, "What's Mommy doing?" "She says I'm messy. She uses the pillow." Mia's voice cracked, but she didn't cry. She just pressed harder with the crayon until the paper nearly tore. The CPS supervisor beside Aaron scribbled notes. Marcus murmured, "She's giving us disclosure. Enough to corroborate what we already have." Aaron swallowed hard. "She's doing it without breaking," he whispered, pride and grief tangled in his voice. In the room, Clara shifted the conversation toward comfort. "What makes you feel safe, Mia?" Mia hesitated. Then she drew another figure, tall, with dark hair. She added a small hand clutching his shirt. "Daddy." Clara smiled softly. That's wonderful. Can you tell me what Daddy says that helps? Mia looked up for the first time, eyes wide, and said, he says he's not leaving. Aaron shut his eyes, exhaling hard. The words cut deeper than any accusation. Because now, in this sterile room with crayons and cameras, his daughter had said the truth aloud. After the session, Clara thanked Mia and offered her a sticker sheet. Mia chose one, an umbrella with rainbow stripes, and placed it on her bear's belly. When the door opened, Aaron stepped forward. Mia ran to him, pressing into his chest. He lifted her, holding her tight, his face buried in her hair. She didn't speak, but she didn't have to. Clara and the CPS worker exchanged glances, satisfied but solemn. She disclosed enough, Clara said quietly. This strengthens the case. Marcus nodded. We keep building. But today, she gave us the piece only she could. Aaron held his daughter tighter, whispering into her hair, you did so good, Bug. So good. Outside, the sun had broken through the gray at last. For the first time in weeks, Aaron felt a sliver of light that wasn't manufactured. The silence that had strangled the house was cracking, replaced with words that would carry weight in a courtroom. But he also knew storms don't end with one confession. Margaret's influence still loomed, and Laurel's denial would not collapse easily. The battle was shifting, not over. Still, as he buckled Mia into the car seat, her bear now marked with a rainbow umbrella, he felt something new. Not just fear, not just fury. Hope, small, fragile, but alive. For 2 nights after the advocacy interview, Aaron actually slept. Not deeply, not without dreams, but without jerking awake at every creak in the house. Mia had spent those nights at Charlotte's, the elderly neighbor who had promised to keep her close like she was my own. Aaron visited each evening, sat at the kitchen table with Mia while she colored, then left when she grew drowsy. He kissed her forehead and whispered the same words she trusted enough to repeat in that little room with the soft rug, I'm not leaving. But rest never lasted long. On the 3rd day, Marcus slid a folder across the diner booth toward him. Its cover was stamped with a case number and Arizona Department of Child Welfare, sealed. You said you wanted to understand how Laurel got here, Marcus said. Well, meet Diane Lambert at 15. Aaron opened the file slowly. Inside were photocopies of incident reports, therapist notes, and one photograph paperclipped to the corner. It showed a girl with downcast eyes, a hospital bracelet on her wrist, a faint scar bandaged near the crook of her arm. The report called it a superficial laceration consistent with self-harm. She tried once, Marcus explained. Overdose another time. Both swept under the rug because Margaret told everyone Diane was dramatic. The file says, severe depression, borderline traits, risk factors high. Aaron skimmed pages that blurred together, truancy, dropping out, alleged neglect by mother, no follow-up. One line made him stop cold, patient expresses fear of being a mother herself, repeats, I don't know how. He shut the folder, jaw tight. So Margaret broke her, then handed her my child. Marcus's eyes were tired. Patterns repeat unless someone stops them. The next lead came not from Marcus but from Clarissa, the old classmate. She called Aaron late one evening, voice hushed though she was alone in her apartment. There's something I didn't tell you, she confessed. Back then, after the pregnancy, Margaret forced Diane into an abortion. She signed the forms herself. Diane was underage, so no one questioned it. But Diane didn't want it. She cried for weeks. Afterward she stopped smiling completely. Clarissa paused. I think, every time she looks at Mia, she sees what she lost. And she punishes her for it. Aaron gripped the phone, staring at the ceiling. That's not an excuse. It's a chain. And Mia is the next link. The following morning, Marcus arranged a quiet meeting with Dr. Fields. This time, Aaron came armed with the folder. Fields stared at the photocopies, pale. I suspected. But, this. He rubbed his forehead. I should have asked more questions. Should have pushed harder. You'll testify? Marcus asked bluntly. Fields hesitated, then nodded. Yes. If it helps break this cycle, yes. Aaron leaned forward. You were scared of losing your license. I get it. But if you stay silent now, it's not just her license that's at stake. It's my daughter's life. Fields's jaw clenched. Then I won't stay silent. That evening, Aaron returned to his empty house. Laurel was gone, staying with Margaret, preparing defenses of her own, no doubt. Tyler remained in county lockup on harassment charges. For the first time in months, the house felt like his again. Quiet, still, but without menace. He walked into Mia's room. The bedspread lay smooth, the plug still in the wall, the teddy bear on the pillow. He sat at the edge of the bed and pulled from his pocket the folded notes he'd found weeks ago, the crayon drawing with the faceless woman, the pencil scrawl "Don't tell." He placed them beside the new evidence, the Arizona file, Clarissa's statement, Fields' reluctant admission. The table was filling with stories, a child who hid in closets, a teenager coerced by her own mother, a doctor silenced by fear. Together, they painted a lineage of pain Margaret had authored, chapter by chapter. Late that night, Aaron's phone buzzed with an anonymous email, just like before. The subject line read, "Still watching." The body contained a single line, "If you want the rest, check the box under the floorboard in the closet." His pulse kicked. He drove straight to Charlotte's, woke Mia gently, and said, "I need to check something. You want to help me?" She nodded sleepily, clutching her bear. Back at the house, they climbed the stairs together. In her closet, Aaron pulled up the loose board in the corner. Beneath it was a small cardboard box, taped twice. Inside lay scraps, broken pencils, old notes, and a torn photograph of Laurel as a teenager, standing next to Margaret, eyes blank, belly faintly swollen under an oversized hoodie. Mia stared at it, confused. "That's Mommy." Aaron's throat tightened. "Yeah, bug. That's her. Before you." She pressed closer to him, whispering, "I don't like it." He put the photo back gently. "Neither do I. But now it's part of the truth. And the truth keeps you safe." Later, in Marcus's car, Aaron handed over the box. Marcus studied the photo, frowning. Anonymous tip again. Whoever sent these, maybe someone close to Margaret. Maybe someone who's finally had enough. Or someone who wants me to see just how deep this goes, Aaron muttered. Marcus glanced at him. Doesn't matter who. What matters is this, Margaret isn't untouchable anymore. Between the Arizona file, Clarissa's testimony, Fields' admission, and now this, the chain isn't just strong. It's visible. Courts can't ignore it. Aaron exhaled, looking out the window at the dark. For the first time, he didn't just feel like a father gathering evidence. He felt like a soldier again, fighting not with bullets, but with paper, voices, and a child's drawings. And this time, there was no mission more important. The courthouse wasn't grand. No marble columns, no echoing domes. Just a squat brick building with narrow windows and a smell of old wood polish clinging to the hallways. But for Aaron, walking through those doors with Marcus at his side felt heavier than any battlefield he had ever stepped onto. He took a seat in the second row, just behind the prosecutor's table. He wasn't testifying today, that would come later, but he would be present. Mia, on the advice of her therapist, stayed with Charlotte. Better to shield her from the sight of people she had drawn as monsters. At the front sat 3 chairs, each occupied. Laurel, hair neatly tied back, clothes ironed crisp, hands trembling only slightly. Tyler, jittery and restless, tapping one foot against the tile until the bailiff shot him a glare. And Margaret, spine straight, eyes cold, lips pressed into a line that suggested neither guilt nor fear, only disdain for the proceedings. The judge, an older man with a kind face that turned stern behind his glasses, entered. The room rose, then settled. Papers shuffled. A clock ticked. Silence thickened. The prosecutor began without theatrics. He wasn't here to perform, he was here to lay bricks. Your Honor, this is not a case about sudden violence. It is a case about silence. About patterns repeated and ignored until they reached a child who had no words to defend herself. He introduced the first piece of evidence, the audio recording from Aaron's smart plug. Laurel's voice hissed through the speakers, sharp and unmistakable, useless, just like your, followed by the flat sound of a slap. Then Tyler's whisper, monster likes knees. The courtroom flinched as the silence afterward dragged out. Laurel stared down at the table. Tyler smirked, though his foot tapped faster. Margaret's expression didn't change. Next came the teacher, Ms. Green. She spoke softly but firmly about Mia's withdrawn behavior, her dark drawings, her startled response to loud noises. Children tell the truth in pictures when they can't in words, she said, holding up one of Mia's crayon pages, the house with the dark scribble under the bed. Then Mrs. Hamill, the neighbor, voice shaking but determined, I heard crying at night. Not just once. Not just dreams. Crying like someone was afraid to breathe. Then Dr. Fields, finally stepping out from behind his fear. He admitted his past hesitation, his worry about false reports. But he looked the judge squarely in the eye when he said, I saw marks that didn't match explanations. I regret not documenting them then. I am documenting them now. Each testimony was a drop of water on stone, steady, relentless. But the heaviest weight came not from adults, but from a child's voice. The prosecution played the recording from the advocacy center, the soft words captured in the room with the rug and crayons. That's my room. That's the monster. That's Mommy. He says he's not leaving. The courtroom was silent except for Mia's small voice. Aaron bowed his head, hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. When it was the defense's turn, Margaret finally spoke. Her voice was calm, deliberate. My daughter has always been fragile, she said, gesturing toward Laurel. She struggled as a teenager. She needed guidance. I gave it to her. Now these so-called witnesses, neighbors, a teacher, want to rewrite history. They don't know this family. They don't understand discipline. Children bruise. Children cry. That does not make us monsters. Her words hung in the air like smoke, but the prosecutor let them linger before replying. Discipline, he said quietly, does not make a child hide in closets. Discipline does not leave a 6-year-old unable to breathe when the lights go out. And discipline does not silence 3 generations of women until one finally dares to whisper the truth in a room designed to keep her safe. The judge leaned forward, hands folded. His gaze swept from Laurel to Tyler to Margaret. He spoke without anger, but with weight. Diane Lambert, Laurel, you are sentenced to 4 years in prison without suspension for substantiated abuse of a minor. Laurel's face crumpled, but no sound came. Richard Morgan, Tyler, you are convicted of emotional harassment of a child, involving threats and intimidation. 18 months in prison, with supervised probation following. Tyler's smirk vanished. His foot stilled. And Margaret Lambert, the judge continued, his voice colder now, while you did not strike the child yourself, you are guilty of incitement and willful enabling of abuse. 2 years probation, prohibited from contact with your granddaughter or any other minors. For the first time, Margaret blinked. Not much. But enough. The gavel came down. Papers shuffled again. The bailiff moved. Tyler cursed under his breath as he was led out. Laurel sagged in her chair, tears streaking her face, but she didn't resist. Margaret sat utterly still, her mask intact, but stripped of power in that courtroom. Aaron rose slowly. He felt Marcus's steadying hand at his back. No celebration, no victory shout. Just silence, the kind that comes not from fear, but from truth finally laid bare. He left the courtroom into the drizzle outside. The air smelled clean, washed. He thought of Mia at Charlotte's kitchen table, coloring houses with doors now drawn open. For the first time, the silence didn't suffocate. It felt like space, room to breathe, room to heal. But Aaron also knew healing wasn't automatic. Silence broken still left echoes. And he would have to keep showing up, every day, to prove his promise true. I'm not leaving. The waiting room smelled faintly of chamomile tea and pencil shavings. Posters lined the walls, simple phrases in pastel colors, feelings are real. It's safe to talk here. Aaron sat in one of the soft chairs, Mia curled beside him with her teddy bear, tracing the seam of its ear with one small finger. Lorraine will be right out, the receptionist said with a kind smile. When the door finally opened, a silver-haired woman stepped into the hall. Her presence was quiet, almost like a blanket pulled over a restless sleeper. She didn't raise her voice, didn't ask heavy questions. She simply said, "Mia. I'm Lorraine. Would you like to draw today?" Mia's eyes flicked up to Aaron, then back to the floor. He nodded. "I'll be right here, Bug. Go ahead." The therapy room wasn't like the advocacy center. It was less about testimony, more about healing. Shelves of art supplies, bins of wooden toys, and a low table with stacks of paper waiting. A rug lay in the middle, not colorful like the other, but soft, neutral, inviting. Lorraine set out crayons. "Draw whatever you feel like. No rules." For a long time Mia only held the brown crayon, tapping it against the table. Then, slowly, she began sketching a house. This one had a red roof, purple curtains, and smoke curling from the chimney. She added 2 apple trees in the yard. Finally, she drew 2 figures, one tall, one small, sitting side by side beneath the trees. Lorraine didn't rush. "Who are they?" Mia tilted her head. Her lips pressed together. Then she looked toward the observation corner where Aaron sat, not hidden this time, just a little removed. "That's me and Daddy," she said softly. Aaron swallowed hard. His eyes stung. He stayed still, not wanting to break the fragile thread she had just spun aloud. In later sessions, Lorraine shifted from drawings to small conversations. "What does safe feel like?" she asked Mia once. Mia thought for a long while. "Warm blanket. No yelling. Daddy reading. What does unsafe feel like?" Her crayon pressed too hard, snapping the tip. Door locked. Pillow on face. Monster voice. Aaron wanted to step in, to say something, but Lorraine held up a hand gently. "You're doing so well, Mia. You don't have to say everything at once. Just what you want." Mia nodded, placing the broken crayon piece back in the box. Aaron had his own session, separate. He sat in the same chair, hands clasped. Lorraine studied him with patient eyes. "You've carried rage like a weapon," she said. "It kept you alive. But Mia doesn't need a soldier now. She needs a gardener. Someone who tends, waters, waits." Aaron's jaw tightened. What if I fail her? What if all she remembers is what they did? Lorraine leaned forward slightly. She won't remember only what happened. She'll remember who stayed. Who believed her. Who kept the door open. Her words struck something deep. For years, Aaron had thought in missions, objectives, deadlines, finish lines. But this wasn't a mission with an end. This was a life, and it meant showing up every day, even when nothing dramatic happened. Especially then. One evening after therapy, Mia surprised him. She was already in bed, bear tucked under her chin. As he rose from the chair beside her, she tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy?" He leaned down. "Yeah, Bug. You're staying, right?" He didn't rush the answer. He sat again, placed his hand gently over hers on the blanket. I'm not going anywhere. Even if you're sad, even if you're mad at me, I'll still be here. Always. Mia nodded slowly. Then, for the first time, she pulled the blanket up by herself, tucked it under her chin, and whispered, "Okay." Aaron stayed in the doorway long after she'd fallen asleep, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. It was the first time he realized the silence in the house no longer felt dangerous. It felt like peace. As weeks passed, Mia's drawings changed. Less black scribbles, more doors with light spilling out. Sometimes she drew apple trees, sometimes swings, sometimes just two stick figures standing under an umbrella in the rain. One morning, she taped a picture to the refrigerator without a word, two people holding hands in the yard of a house with the lights on. At the top, in shaky letters, she had written home, the H backward, the strokes uneven, but bold. Aaron stood in the kitchen staring at it. He didn't need to ask her what it meant. The answer was right there in the lines, in the backward H, in the fact she'd chosen to tape it where everyone could see. The house was no longer a place of whispers and bruises. It was becoming what it should have been all along. Still, Lorraine reminded him healing wasn't linear. There will be nights she wakes screaming, she said. Moments when shadows trigger panic. Don't measure progress in straight lines. Measure it in the fact she trusts you enough to scream near you. Aaron carried those words like scripture. Each time Mia startled, each time she froze, he reminded himself, she's not hiding from me. She's letting me see. By the time autumn came, the sessions had become part of their rhythm. School in the morning, therapy twice a week, evenings filled with word games and bedtime stories. Some nights Mia whispered questions about monsters. Some nights she only wanted silence. Aaron gave her both. And always, before she drifted off, he said the same thing, I'm staying. Because promises weren't one-time declarations. They were daily vows, renewed in the quiet moments, written in the language of presence. Winter had begun to soften into early spring. The yard still held patches of frost, but crocuses pushed stubbornly through the soil. Aaron found himself rising earlier than he ever had in deployment, padding into the kitchen to warm milk to the exact temperature Mia's doctor recommended. He practiced toast until the edges crisped without burning. The routines, once foreign, now felt like muscle memory, quiet rituals of presence. Mia taped more drawings to the refrigerator. Some were simple houses, others were apple trees with dotted swings. One morning she proudly stuck up a picture of two figures under slanted lines of rain. The taller held a coat, the smaller, an umbrella. At the top she had written a single word, home. The letters were uneven, the H still backward, but the strokes were bold. Aaron didn't correct her. He only placed his palm flat against the page as if to hold it steady. In the evenings, they played word games with wooden tiles. Sometimes Mia spelled silly words like zebra or mud, laughing when Aaron pretended to misread them. Other nights she spelled heavier words, safe, stay, door. She never explained why, and Aaron never asked. He simply read them aloud, slow and certain, as if declaring them true. One rainy night, after finishing a bedtime story about a girl and a silent forester, Aaron rose to leave. Mia tugged at his sleeve. Don't lock the door, she whispered. He sat back down, tucking the blanket under her chin. Never, he said. The door's always open. She nodded, satisfied, and drifted into sleep. Weeks later, an envelope arrived at the house. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable, Laurel's. Aaron carried it to his room, sat on the edge of the bed, and unfolded the pages. If there's another life, I hope you'll never call anyone mother except your birth mother. But if you could call me that once, just once, I'd walk the rest of this road trying to earn it. The letter didn't ask for forgiveness. It didn't make excuses. It spoke of therapy sessions in prison, of sleepless nights haunted by a small girl clutching a bear. Aaron refolded it carefully and placed it in his drawer. He didn't show Mia, not yet. Lorraine had said the truth didn't need to come all at once. It would come in pieces, when Mia was ready to hold them. That night, Aaron sat at the kitchen table staring at the taped drawings on the refrigerator. Houses with lighted windows, figures holding hands, doors left ajar. He realized Mia had been writing her truth all along. She didn't need a letter to understand family. She was drawing it herself. One Saturday, the front gate buzzer rang. Mia dashed out before Aaron could even wipe his hands, her ponytail crooked, her cheeks pink from the cold. "You're 5 minutes late," she announced to him with mock sternness as he stepped out of the garage. Aaron chuckled. "Red light." She grabbed his hand and pulled him back toward the house. Behind them the gate creaked shut, the sound once harsh now oddly familiar, like a hinge that no longer threatened but simply belonged. That evening, Mia taped another picture to the wall. It showed a house with warm yellow windows, a stone bench under an apple tree, 2 figures in the yard. In one corner she'd drawn a letter in pale gray, gentle strokes, a folded envelope. Aaron studied it. "What's this one about?" Mia shrugged, already skipping off toward her room. But then she paused in the hallway, turned back, and said softly, "I think if someone went the wrong way but wanted to come back, the door should be open." Aaron stood still, her words settling into him. "You're right," he said finally. "But not every door opens right away. Some need time, some need the right knock." Mia nodded, accepting that answer more easily than he expected. "Okay." Then she ran off, her footsteps even, unhurried. That night, after tucking her in, Aaron lingered in the doorway. Mia stirred, eyes half open, and murmured, "You're staying, right?" He crossed the room, sat back down, and placed his hand gently over hers. "I'm staying. Even when you're quiet, even when you're angry, even when it's hard, I'll be here." Her fingers tightened around his. Then, for the first time, she smiled in her sleep. Aaron leaned back, exhaling slowly. The house no longer echoed with fear. It breathed with them, father and daughter, learning together. The next morning, he found Mia had taped one last drawing on the refrigerator. 2 figures again, one tall, one small. Above them, she'd written a single word, steadier this time, "Door." Aaron placed his palm against it and whispered to himself, "Always open." Because no one is born knowing how to be a parent. What matters isn't perfection. It's staying, even when it hurts. It's showing up, day after day, until silence finally gives way to trust. And for the first time, Aaron believed the promise he had made in the dark weeks ago wasn't just survival. It was the beginning of something stronger. Home.